When we last left you, Christine was obviously pretty deep in rebellion. Charlie and I and the gang flew down to Gainesville, Texas to have a party around the time of the Texas Tech-Texas game. What we didn't tell you is that through my urging, Sarge took forever aside in the master bedroom where her parents were hanging out, and that's where he asked her to marry him. But it gets more interesting from here. Welcome to the early life of the J.R. Hendrick Texan Gentleman, the podcast that deals with the early life of J.R. Hendrick. And now, for narrating Game Over and Game Over, Sins of the Fathers, is J.R. and Jimmy. 5 p.m. Some of the guys, Kevin, Charlie, and Dave, left to play in the football game, leaving most of the people, namely myself, Ken, Jim Bob, Brent, Stoney, and Calvin, to enjoy pizza and the pre-game party. Daddy called me and chewed me out to make sure that the place was in cleanliness. 5:10 a.m. At the ranch, 5:10 p.m. At the ranch, Jim and Betsy have a strong disagreement on how Jim is treating JR. And his friends having their party. Elizabeth, his mother-in-law, put in her 2 cents on how Jim shouldn't have called and given JR a hard time. Jim said he'd sleep on the couch because of how much he and Betsy are fighting. 7 p.m. Texas Tech scored the first touchdown of the game, thanks to Dave Smith. Yeehaw! Calvin cheered. Just wait until you guys have to play against Oklahoma next weekend, Jim Horton said. Stoney turned round and glared at him. JR has pizza and soda flowing around here. This is the last thing we need to hear. 9:30 p.m. The final score was coming in. It was Texas Tech 56-10. Texas Tech had clearly spanked Texas, and it looked like it was a very serious win. One a.m. Central. Meanwhile, back to the ranch, Jim gets into a very serious argument with Christine over JR. 2:05 a.m. Jim is sitting in the den at Swainfield, reading the Bible and praying. He gets the feeling that he had one night when he and Betsy had a bad fight over about JR's education back in the fall of 1983. And he realizes to avoid the ire of his in-laws, he had to find some way to make it right. The argument with Christine really struck him hard, even though he didn't want to believe it. Betsy was going to invite John Dustin for Christmas in Gainesville. And that would be one thing. that would turn JR against the family. That's at that time my daddy, that the help he did, what he did, was going to get people in the family angry at him for a long time. And though I never understood what he meant, but one thing I will say is that he had his eye on the ball as far as his kids' success and welfare. 2:15 p.m. Central. Sitting on the Swainfield front porch, Elizabeth and Jim sit in their coats and light cigarettes. I know you still don't understand. And even though I don't like like your message, I can understand maybe why you got on to JR yesterday afternoon, Elizabeth said. No excuse, Jim said. We'll go with you and Betsy to Gainesville for Christmas. But I might tell you something. You and Justin, ever step out of line, then my grandson and I will be leaving quickly. 4:15 a.m. JR and Jim Bob were the first ones up early. Together, they sat there drinking Dr. Peppers. And JR asked for advice about whether or not he should go with Jennifer Bowers or with Karen Crowder. Jim Bob suggested perhaps Karen to be the safe bet. 5:35 a.m. Central. Bill Mayer calls Jim to remind him, to let him know, that Paul Dunstreet is resigning as Jim's special counsel, and that Bill recommended that Jim nominate Ann Coltrane in lieu of Dunstreet's recommendation. Coltrane is a Fort Worth native and former journalist, a conservative crusader who would be right up Jim's alley. 7 a.m. Central. JR, Ken, Brent, Dave, and Stoney wake up early and have a little breakfast. The limo would swing by at 8 to pick up Ken to take him to church. And then JR, Stoney, Brent, and Calvin would go to church around 10. After church, a helicopter would whisk Ken and Jim Bob away to the airport for their flight back to Midland. 8 a.m. Central. The Henry family sits down to breakfast. Jim gets on to Christine for trying to start a fight with Amy Kathleen. 10 a.m. Central. J.R. Brent and Stoney and Calvin go to the St. Amos Assemblies of Christ Church for Sunday school and church. 10:30 a.m. The Hendrick family attend Ridgewood Heights Baptist Church, pastored by John Braswell. The minister would pastor the church until 2000. 2 p.m. With the Odessa group gone, J.R. is in his room, waiting for Katie, the afternoon service, to let him know that it's time for dinner. 4:30 p.m. Central. In the den at Swainfield, Claude had just returned to the condo to be with Becky. But it's very clear to Jim and Betsy that he is getting bored with Becky. Jim hugs his wife, apologizes for his behavior the evening before. At 5 a.m. Central. The crew of 8 eat leftover pizza from Snappy Tom's along with some grape soda. JR is anxious to return to school where he will be studying media consumption theory. Charlie was not so eager because tomorrow night would be his couch potato night. 7:05 p.m. JR and his crew lock up the house in Gainesville and take the 55-minute ride in the limo to DFW International Airport. At the same time, Jim is listening to the radio for a Rush Limbaugh Weekend Minute when it was announced that President Clinton was to retain Dick Morris, a political consultant, after the midterm election losses. 8:15 p.m. J.R. Hendrick and his entourage board the private jet that would take them from Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport to Lubbock, Texas, before he would take off and go to Midland, Texas to pick up Madison for their charter to go back to Washington, D.C. to pick up Elizabeth Marie. 10 p.m. JR, Dave, and Charlie arrive back in their dorm at Gordon Hall. JR and all 4 of them go to bed early to get ready for classes the next day. Hope you enjoy listening to the J.R. Hendrick Texan Gentleman. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, become a part of the adventure. This is J.R. Hendrick saying until next time, get ready for the rest of the story. It's going to be more calmer, and more interesting from here. Take care. God bless y'all.